I saw real snow the first time in my life today, so I am giddy as anything. And if I look like I've been crying, it's because my allergies are trying to kill me. Oh, I'm about to sneeze. Never mind. I'm not used to looking at the camera when I talk. Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name's Kristen and I want to talk about some books. I have my 26 books I want to read in 2026 list ready to go. I'm proud to say I completed my 25 in 2025, so pressure is on to do it again. They're sitting in front of me and let's talk about it. One thing I will say about this list is that it could be a bit of an interesting combination of titles. So if you haven't seen my BookTube newbie tag, I am actually backpacking. So I'm not with my lovely bookshelves at the moment, and I'm also not purchasing my usual amount of physical books. So I thought it was the perfect time to really prioritize catching up on the books that I own that have gone untouched. So it isn't necessarily the most representative of my current taste, but there's quite a few books that I bought a long time ago that I haven't gotten around to yet. So those are my top priority for the next reading year. And I also dedicated 4 spots on this list to recommendations from some of my friends. So there might be a rogue book or two at the end. The first book on my list, which are in no particular order, by the way, is Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. So I read the first 3 books in the Red Rising saga. One of my best friends loves this series and has been begging me to read it, so I finally got around to it. I took a bit of a pause after the first 3 books for some other reads, but I am very excited to dive back in. So the Red Rising saga is a sci-fi that I'm assuming everybody knows about by now. It is very much leaning towards space opera, very high stakes, very political. It's about a society who in the future have moved to Mars and throughout the solar system, and their social hierarchy is broken down into ranks of color. Gold sit at the top, red sit at the bottom, and chaos ensues as it always does. I believe the 4th book takes place after a bit of a time jump, so I am very excited to see what's been going on in the world. Book number 2 is Catabasis, or Catabasis, whichever way you're supposed to say it, by R.F. Kuang. This is the only book of hers that I have not read yet, and I'm very excited to tick it off. As far as I know, this is a dark academia fantasy adventure kind of story about 2 Cambridge students who have to journey into hell to rescue their professor, I believe because they want a recommendation letter from him. I know there's a lot of classical literature that ties into it that I've not read a ton of, but I'm assuming that shouldn't make a difference. I love R.F. Kuang and her writing. I think she's brilliant. Not every book she's written is a perfect read to me. I think she could sometimes trust her readers a bit more to keep up with her. But overall, I always have a really fantastic time, and I think the quality of her writing is phenomenal. So I'm just very keen to dive back into another story by her. Hello from your first appearance by Editing Kristen, because I am an idiot and I completely skipped a book. So here we are. Book number 3 on our list is The Well of Ascension by good old Brando Sando, an icon of the genre. I have been wanting to dive into the Cosmere for such a long time, and I was always very intimidated by it. It's obviously a large number of books, but I've heard nothing but spectacular things about the series. So 2025, I finally read The Final Empire and I loved it. I had such a great time. There were a few things that were not my favorite and I think could have been improved on, but I know The Final Empire was really early days in his writing career, and I know it only gets better from here, so I'm really excited to see how his writing evolves. But I loved the world, I loved the characters. I think it was already so complex, and I know it's going to get crazier and crazier. It's been a couple months, and some of the apprehension has crept back in, but I am excited. I am excited. I am excited. That is book 3, The Well of Ascension. and back to our regularly scheduled programming. Next on the list is Emma by Jane Austen. If you can hear that, it's actually New Year's Eve. Fireworks are taking place. Emma. I technically have already read this, but it's been a very long time and I don't really remember anything about it. I know that Emma is supposed to be an unlikable heroine. Jane Austen thought that nobody would like this character except for herself. Turns out everybody that reads her falls in love with her. She's quite contrary and goes against 18th century stereotypes, which is probably why people can relate to her so much. It's a tale of a young woman. There's obviously a little hint of romance in there, as there always is, but yeah, one of the first classics that I'm aiming to tick off my list this year. So next is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. What an interesting woman. This is the last of the published Shadowhunter series that I have not read. I was a big Shadowhunters fan as a teenager. Started with the Mortal Instruments. In hindsight, kind of questionable. However, you can pry the Infernal Devices out of my cold dead hands as far as I'm concerned. I would die for those books and for those characters. So I read them younger and then I had a bit of a reading slump. A 5-year reading slump essentially after I graduated high school. I think the nostalgia element definitely helps with these books. I read the Dark Artifices trilogy in 2025 and now it is time for me to start The Last Hours. I believe this is another more period series, which I absolutely love. So I think this is actually set before The Last Hours. It all gets a bit confusing, but I'm excited. I have fun in this world. I'm not expecting a literary masterpiece by any means. I just have a good time, and sometimes that's all you need, right? We're following Cordelia Carstairs in this trilogy. I do love a Carstairs, personally. I'm just interested to see what happens in this one, to be honest. Now, this next book is not a hidden gem by any means. It has been out for over a decade and the author has won a Pulitzer Prize. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a novel about World War II set in Paris. Honestly, I try to go into books without knowing a ton. I know that one of the main characters of this novel is a young girl who is blind, who grew up in a French neighborhood, and I believe she crosses paths with a young man who is essentially in an academy for Nazi youth. I have a feeling that this book is going to rip my heart out. So the second I need to cry, this is going to be my first pick. The next book is Spice Road by Maya Ibrahim. I first picked this up because I saw the cover and I thought it was stunning. And then I read the back of the book. So that's how it made it onto my shelves. This is a young adult fantasy. Essentially, what I know is that it is set in an Arabian-inspired land. And the magic system is based on spices that awaken powers in people who have a certain affinity for that kind of thing. I'm not really looking to know anymore. I just want to jump in and see what I think. So that is Spice Road. Another series that I'm going to be continuing is The Bone Season, Book 2, The Mime Order. I have a really good friend who is absolutely obsessed with Samantha Shannon and this world. So I finally got around to reading it for her. And I had a great time. I think Samantha Shannon's writing is really beautiful and she packs in like emotion and action and politics really, really well. I think the world so far seems very well thought out. So instead of spoiling anything and talking about the book I'm up to, The Bone Season is a dystopian series set in a futuristic London where psychic abilities are present in a portion of the population and the rest of society is not happy about that. So there is a big underworld in London that our main character Paige is a part of, and it kind of hits the fan, I guess. I went in really blind. I didn't get any information from my friend because I wanted to go in with an open mind, and oh boy, I am very excited to keep going. Next on the list is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. So this is a debut novel, I'm pretty sure, from a few years ago. It is a story based on a Chinese myth about a girl who lives on the moon. The series is called The Celestial Kingdom, and I know there's obviously quite a few fantastical elements, and I'm trying not to learn too much. Again, we love to go in blind and be surprised. But yeah, I've read quite a few Chinese mythology inspired reads, and I really enjoy the atmosphere of them. So I'm looking forward to this one. Next book is the next classic on the list. We have Frankenstein. This is definitely a knowing reread for me. I studied this book in my senior year of high school. I remember broadly, but details not so much. Obviously, one of the most famous novels of all time. Looking forward to jogging my memory a bit for this one. So we've got another young adult fantasy on the list, which is Legendborn. This came onto my radar thanks to Carrie Can Read, who is one of my favorite booktubers. And when she described this as a retelling of Arthurian legend, it immediately came home with me. If any of you remember the BBC show Merlin, oh my god, that show, I'll cry just thinking about it. I love Arthurian legend. I love Merlin and Arthur. I think anything to do with that, I'm immediately interested. I know the main character is a young black girl living in the South in America, and she's also dealing with a lot of grief. So I know there's a lot of much more complex elements to this book that sound really fascinating, and everything I've heard says that this series tackles those issues really well. But I would be lying if I said it wasn't the Arthurian legend that had me interested. I've been meaning to read this for the longest time, and I want to get my little hands on it now. I have another sequel to read, which is Heavenly Tyrant by Shiran J. Zhao. That follows Iron Widow, the first book. Iron Widow is a sci-fi, I would say, that ties futuristic technology with Chinese history. Essentially, we have a half historical, half futuristic China that is under attack by tech alien hybrid monsters. And boys in the military pair up with young women to power mech suits to fight these monsters. The problem is that the pairing that they use to power these suits is more often than not deadly for the young women. And our main character comes into play because her sister was actually one of these women that they call concubine pilots. And our main character, Zetian, wants revenge. And rightfully so, in my opinion. And things don't exactly go as expected. So I'm really interested. I actually love this book. I thought it was unlike anything I'd read before. I think it's a very unique story, and the main character is so cool and so powerful, and I just love her. So I'm excited to see where her story goes. The next name on the list is another big one in the literary fiction world, Frederick Backman with Beartown. So everything I've seen about this book or this series is tears. I know it is about a small town that has a big culture about hockey, and it's quite a reflective, intimate, personal story about the people that live here. I know absolutely nothing about the plot, and I don't need to. I am just, I'm not going to say excited. I'm going to say I'm apprehensive in the very best way. Honestly, if it's hitting people that hard, I want to know why. I'm so sorry. If I wait for the fireworks to be done, I'll be here until next year. The next book is The Bastard of Istanbul by Elif Shafak. So coming on from my first video, this is one of the books that I bought on my travels. Elif Shafak is a Turkish novelist and activist. I visited Turkey earlier in 2025, and this book follows two young women, one living in America and one living in Turkey. There's a lot of history and culture and positive and negative events that tie these two young women together in their past. I've heard phenomenal things about this author's writing, and she's actually a name that I've seen popping up in quite a few bookstores lately. So I'm really intrigued to see what this story is like, and I'm looking forward to reading something a little bit outside of my normal. Next in line is a book that I think every fantasy reader will have heard of by now, which is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. I've tried to avoid plot details, but one of my best friends read this book and was absolutely raving about it, and that's pretty much all I need to try something out, really. I know this book is a fantasy standalone, which we don't always get that much of. I might be wrong, but I feel like it's not the most common kind of book to come across, which really excites me. Honestly, anything like dark, emotional, fantastical, I am on board. So looking forward to this one for sure. I want to see what the hype is about. Something I'm actually very excited to read from this list is called Every Rising Sun by Jamila Ahmed. This is a historical fiction that I'm really intrigued by. It is a 1001 Nights retelling. So our main character is Shahrazad. She's a storyteller and she makes a bit of a mistake by telling a very powerful man that she saw his wife having an affair, which she did, but that leads to some bloodshed. And not just his wife, this man actually marries a new woman in the morning and kills her that night. And that pattern starts to repeat itself every single day. So Shahrazad volunteers herself to be the next bride in an attempt to put a stop to this killing spree that has started based on her choices. That is the catalyst of the story, and I think it gets quite political and potentially violent after that. Not too sure, but that beginning of the story I was locked in as soon as I heard it. So I'm really looking forward to reading that one. Something that I touched on in the stories I loved as a teenager in my first video was the Percy Jackson series, and that led into a love of Greek mythology. So the next book on the list is Electra by Jennifer Saint. Obviously there has been a big resurgence of Greek mythological retellings, and I've been having such a great time with it. I love the ambiance of a Greek myth. I think they're such a good basis for a story in any format, no matter how closely linked they are. Electra is a story that ties into the Trojan War, and I don't really need to know much more. If it's a Greek retelling, I'll kind of it's one of those auto-buy things for me, and I'm not ashamed of it. Another classic that we're aiming to read this year that I have never read before is Little Women, and I don't know how I've gone this far without picking it up. Obviously, a classic set in Civil War America, following four sisters through their lives, and it is just a tale about being a daughter, being a mother, being a sister, being a woman. I'm just curious at this point. A lot of the times I read classics out of pure curiosity to see why they've held up popularity for so long. I find it very intriguing. Somewhere very exciting that I visited in 2025 was Egypt. It was a short stop, but the book that I picked up by an Egyptian author and feminist activist is Woman at Point Zero by Nawal El-Saadawi. Many apologies if I'm mispronouncing any of these names, but it is a very short novel that has been translated from Arabic, and I thought it sounded really powerful and kind of gut-wrenching. I think it is about a woman that is sentenced to death for killing essentially a pimp in the streets of Cairo, and it is a reflection of her life while she's waiting for this sentence to be carried out, and how she got from her childhood to prostitution to prison. I think it is a very defiant novel, and I'm really eager to read this. Next on the list, we have a book called Lies We Sing to the Sea by Sarah Underwood. Again, this one was a judge a book by its cover kind of moment. It was so beautiful. I saw it on the shelf at my bookstore and I wanted to buy it immediately. Turns out it is another Greek mythology story. I know this is a tragic tale, as most Greek stories are, and there will be mythology tied with love, tied with history, and that's enough for me. Okay, getting towards the end now. My next classic is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I've actually really wanted to read this for quite a long time. I've known the general idea of the story about a man who sells his soul for eternal youth and beauty. It honestly feels like quite a relevant concept for such an old book. And I know it's quite short as well. It's just another one of those big famous classics that I've always wanted to read. So we're finally going to get around to it. And the last of my picks before I get into my friends' recommendations is a bit of an older one, but we've got An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I have heard this title so many times over the years, and it's been on my shelf for quite a long time as well, but I actually don't know what it's about. I think potentially inspired by an ancient Roman kind of society. Looks like we've got two main characters, a slave and a soldier. It is a YA, and that can definitely hit for me. I've read a few misses as well, so this is more of a try it and potentially move it along kind of thing, but always hoping I'm gonna love whatever I pick up, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so my first recommendation from a friend is White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Another classic. I have a goal of reading 12 classics this year. If I finish my 26 books, I will be, I think, halfway there. So fingers crossed for that. I think this is, from what I know, very, very short and quite a fast-paced, reflective, introspective kind of book. I can't imagine a lot happens in 80 pages, but my emotional big sister loved this book when she read it, so I'm very excited to read it and talk to her about it. The next recommendation is actually the only non-fiction that's made it onto this list, but my boyfriend has recommended to me Notes from the End of Everything by Robert Pantano. The way he described this to me, that is all I know, is that an author and philosopher who was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer kept a bunch of notes on his laptop about some of his thoughts and experiences with an imminent death looming ahead of him. And after he passed, his collection, his journal, was found by some of his friends and family. After some tweaks or some removals, this author compiled and published these notes. So I'm very interested to see what this read is like. I think it'll be quite emotional, obviously, but it's a really interesting perspective to hear from. So I'm looking forward to a bit of reflection with that one, I think. Okay, and my second last book of my 26 is called We Are Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Joy Fowler. This is recommended by one of my best friends, and I'm once again going in without knowing much. I know it's a story of a family, and there has been a massive change that's taken place in their lives that we don't know about as the reader. Some of the children in the family are no longer around, and the personalities of the parents and the remaining daughter are not what they used to be. So I'm just very intrigued. I have no idea what I'm in for, but when it comes to books and the recommendations of my friends, I do as I am requested, essentially. And number 26 on the list is quite a change from the rest of the books on here, but we have The Baby Dragon Cafe by A.T. Qureshi. My other best friend recommended this book to me, and I am very glad to have something a little bit more lighthearted on this list. I feel like it's looking quite heavy currently. So this, from what I know, is just a cute little cozy fantasy book. Anything with dragons, I'm kind of there for. Potentially, yes, a romance. I am curious about the logistical reality of having dragons in a cafe. That seems like a fire hazard, but I'm excited. I think we're ending on a happy note, hopefully. And yeah, The Baby Dragon Cafe. So if you're still here, Thank you for listening to my 26 books I want to read in 2026. My reading goal is 100 books, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot more happening. If you have any recommendations for me, I will always be happy to hear them. If you have any advice for me or feedback on the videos that I'm starting to make, I would also be very glad to hear that. Obviously, I'm still learning. Thank you for putting up with any fireworks that you heard during this recording. I am very excited to start reading in 2026. Thank you for being here. I will hopefully see you next time.